Every family has a role. My name is Avery, I'm 32 years old, and my role was always the quiet one. You know those family get-togethers, the ones that are really just a competition? For my family, the Thorne family, our annual Christmas party was exactly that. I'd listen to them all brag about their latest multi-million-dollar deals and extravagant vacations. And every year they'd turn to me, the failure who they thought was still struggling in a tiny apartment. This year, my brother Liam and my cousin Madison made a point of laughing about my poor status in front of everyone. They had no idea that while they were busy living a lie, I was quietly building an empire of my own. They thought they had the upper hand, but what they didn't know was that I was holding a secret that was about to turn their perfect world completely upside down. Let me take you back to where it began. My whole life is in your hands. I trust you. The polished brass plaque on the door read The Thorne Estate. It was a new addition, something my parents had commissioned just in time for their annual Christmas party. The engraving was crisp, the lettering elegant, a perfectly crafted symbol of everything they held dear. My whole family was like that plaque, shiny on the outside, a little cold to the touch. I stood in the grand foyer for a moment, listening to the buzz of conversation from the main hall. Laughter tinkled like 1,000 little bells, and the clinking of champagne flutes was the soundtrack to 100 unspoken judgments. My brother Liam and my cousin Madison were probably already in their element, holding court, basking in the glow of their latest acquisitions. For them, this wasn't a party. It was a yearly performance review, a chance to prove who had climbed the highest on the corporate ladder, who had the most impressive portfolio, and who had the best stories to tell. I wasn't there to compete. I was there because I had to be. It was family after all. At least that's what I told myself. I walked into the great hall, the vast space already packed with family members and business associates. A towering Christmas tree decorated with tasteful silver and gold ornaments dominated the room. My mother spotted me from across the room and gave me a tight, polite smile. She was in a deep crimson dress, looking every bit the matriarch of the Thorne family. I felt a familiar pang of something like guilt, though I wasn't sure what for. Liam was in a corner, leaning against a marble fireplace, a glass of bourbon in his hand. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive suit, his voice booming as he recounted a recent real estate deal. Just closed on a new property out in Greenwich, he announced to a small crowd of admirers. A 6-bedroom colonial. The kind of place you buy when you've already bought everything else. His crowd laughed dutifully. Madison, a few feet away, rolled her eyes and approached me, her diamond earrings catching the light. She was a social media influencer now, a lifestyle guru who documented her every extravagant move. Her perfect smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "So you made it," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost on your way from Brooklyn." I smiled back, a genuine smile that she couldn't understand. "The subway was running on time," I said. "A Christmas miracle. Madison didn't get it, and I didn't expect her to." Her life was a perfectly curated gallery of expensive dinners and lavish vacations. My life was a 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a pre-war building, and I liked it just fine. My own space, my own schedule, my own rules. To my family, it was a sign of my complete and utter failure. My father came over and gave me a perfunctory hug. "Avery," he said, his voice flat. "It's good you could come. Your mother was worried. Worried I'd embarrass them," he meant. Worried I'd show up in my sensible shoes and my old coat, a living, breathing testament to my modest's life. I knew the drill. The conversation would eventually turn to my career. It always did. "So still doing the little deals," Liam said, joining us. "Helping young couples find their first shoebox." He laughed, a loud, artificial sound that made my teeth ache. Madison chimed in. "I can't believe people our age still rent. Can you, Liam? It's just so." She waved her hand dismissively, as if the concept of renting was too pedestrian to even put into words. I took a slow sip of my iced tea. My family liked to think they knew everything about me. They saw my small apartment, my modest car, my plain clothes. They saw me as the black sheep, the one who didn't fit in, the one who chose a simple life, because I couldn't handle the pressure of the Thorn name. They saw the shell, but they had no idea about the world I had built inside of it. "I like my space," I said, a quiet warmth in my voice. "It's a nice place, good neighbors." Aunt Clara, my father's older sister, approached the group. She was the only one in the family who had ever seemed to understand me, though we rarely spoke. She gave me a sympathetic half-smile, a silent apology for her family's behavior. But she too remained on the sidelines. "You're 32, sweetie," my mother added, her voice full of patronizing concern. "Isn't it time to buy something real?" I just smiled. They all laughed like I was a joke. I just sat there, my heart full, my eyes fixed on the perfectly crafted plaque by the door. If only they knew what was coming. I had a perfectly crafted contract of my own. That perfectly crafted contract was sitting right there in my purse, waiting for its big moment. My fingers brushed the smooth leather of my handbag, and I felt a quiet thrill run through me. It was a secret, a very expensive, very deliberate secret. They saw me as the punchline to their little joke, but they had no idea that I had been building my own punchline for years, one quiet brick at a time. I remember the exact moment it all started. It was a cold day back in 2017. I was still a wide-eyed college student, and my father was working on a redevelopment project in the outer boroughs, a place called Queens. It was a block of old brick buildings, full of working-class families who had lived there for generations. My dad had promised them that he would restore the buildings and keep them affordable. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed piece of fiction. He had gathered a group of tenants in the lobby and laid out his plan. My family was going to put millions of dollars into making their buildings beautiful. New windows, new plumbing, new facades. They cheered, so grateful, so full of hope. But a few weeks later, the eviction notices came. Not a renovation plan, but a demolition order. They were tearing down the buildings to put up luxury condos. I was heartbroken. The old man who ran the corner deli, the young couple with a new baby, the elderly woman who sat on her stoop every afternoon. They were all gone, their lives uprooted for a bigger profit margin. I confronted my father about it, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and confusion. He just patted my shoulder and told me that was how business worked. He said you couldn't be sentimental in real estate. That's when I decided that I would be different. I would be a thorn in his side, a constant reminder of what he had done. I wasn't just going to be successful. I was going to be successful with a purpose. So I started small. I used the money from my very first job to buy a tiny condo in a building that was falling apart. I fixed it up myself, painting walls and redoing the floors. I learned everything I could about local real estate laws. I sold that condo and used the profit to buy another. The money grew and my purpose became clearer. I wasn't in it for the grand gestures or the Hamptons houses. I was in it for the families who were just trying to find a safe, affordable place to call home. My company was born in that small condo, just a little seed of an idea. I named it West Pine Capital. West for the westward migration of people looking for opportunity, and Pine for the strength of a tree that could grow anywhere. It was a silly, sentimental name, I know. But it was mine. I worked quietly away from the prying eyes of my family. I never once asked for their help, never once told them about the quiet, solid success I was building. They were too busy to notice anyway, too busy. Chasing bigger and bigger deals, their eyes always fixed on the next shiny thing. They thought I was a failure because I wasn't making a big splash because I was living in a rental. They had no idea that I was buying up the properties they were too arrogant to see, too blind to value. The old apartment buildings, the rundown retail spaces, the historic blocks of brownstones. I bought them all, fixed them up, and rented them out to people who deserved a little more than my family was willing to give them. I was thinking about all of this as Madison's perfectly manicured fingers reached for a canapé. "You know that old building you live in on Fulton is about to be torn down," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I saw a notice about a new condo development there. It's a shame, I guess, that all those old places are disappearing." Liam, who had rejoined our little circle, nodded. "Yeah, I heard about that project. Another luxury building? Sucks to be a renter when the market's hot." They were talking about my building. My building. I just smiled, a quiet, secret smile that stretched from ear to ear. They were so busy congratulating themselves on their own greatness, they didn't even know that their greatness was already on the chopping block. I was holding up the document, the silence in the room so thick you could have cut it with a knife. For a moment no one moved, no one spoke. The laughter, the music, the polite chatter, it all stopped. I just stood there, waiting. It was the longest 30 seconds of my life, but I wouldn't have traded it for anything. Finally, Liam was the one to break the silence. "Avery, what is this?" His voice was low and a little shaky. "This isn't funny." My father stepped forward, his face etched with confusion and a hint of something else, a flicker of concern. "Avery, darling, what are you doing? Is this some kind of joke?" I shook my head slowly, keeping my eyes on Liam. "No, this isn't a joke, Liam. This is the culmination of 10 years of work. While you and Madison were taking trips to Italy and buying expensive cars, I was building a company. A real company with a mission that actually meant something." I could see the gears turning in his head. He was trying to figure out how. He was trying to place the name West Pine Capital. He ran through a mental Rolodex of every major real estate firm in New York, and I knew my company wasn't on it. It wasn't supposed to be. I had kept it small, private, and out of the public eye for this very reason. "It's not possible," my father repeated, his voice weak. "Our lawyers would have known. Our financial advisors would have known." "Your lawyers and your financial advisors work for Thorne and Company, Dad," I said gently. "West Pine Capital has its own team. A team that's very, very good at what they do. We've been working on this for months. Quietly. Secretly." Madison finally found her voice. But why? Why would you do this?" "We're family." Her words were punctuated by a nervous laugh, a sound that was completely out of place in the stunned silence of the room. "Why?" I repeated. "You really have to ask me that." My voice got a little louder, the frustration of a decade bubbling up to the surface. "Every single holiday, every single family dinner, you all look at me like I'm some kind of a charity case. You laugh at my little deals. You scoff at my rental apartment. You've spent my entire adult life calling me a failure. But you are a failure." Liam blurted out, unable to control his anger. "You live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. You don't have a car. You don't have a wife. You don't have any of the things that matter. And you have all the things that matter, don't you, Liam?" I shot back. "You have a $5 million house in the Hamptons that you bought with company money. You have a brand new yacht that you're pretending is a business expense. You have a designer watch for every day of the week, all charged to the company credit card." A collective gasp went through the crowd. This was not a private family squabble anymore. This was a public spectacle, and I was the one holding the spotlight. My father looked like he was about to collapse. My mother had one hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with fear. Liam's face was a mask of pure rage. He started to lunge at me, but my father grabbed his arm, holding him back. "Liam, stop it," my father said, his voice a low growl. "What is she talking about?" I didn't let him answer. "This isn't just about an acquisition, Dad. This is a comprehensive audit. And it shows that Liam has been misappropriating funds for years. It shows that Madison has been billing her influencer trips to the company as client outreach." Madison, who had been listening with a look of stunned disbelief, suddenly found a defensive smirk. "Those were business trips. I have the receipts." "I'm sure you do, Madison," I said, a little too sweetly. "I'm sure the $5,000 Hermes scarf was a client gift, and the $3,000 spa weekend was market research." I didn't have to say anything else. Her face told me everything I needed to know. The smirk vanished, replaced by a look of terror. She knew I had her. "Avery," my mother whispered, "please stop. You're ruining Christmas." "I didn't ruin Christmas, Mom," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You all did. You ruined every family dinner for a decade. You ruined every holiday. You turned this family into a business, and now you're finally seeing what happens when business isn't done with integrity." I turned back to Liam, who was still struggling against my father's grip. "I didn't do this to destroy you. I did it because someone had to." I did it because you've been lying and cheating and stealing, and you were about to take Thorne and company down with you." The crowd was a sea of shocked faces. They all knew the Thorne name. They all knew the reputation. And they all knew in that one moment that the reputation was a lie. They started to whisper, to mumble, to look at each other with wide, disbelieving eyes. So now I said, my voice cutting through the noise, "Here's what's going to happen. West Pine Capital has taken over Thorne and Company. The building is ours. And in 3 months we're going to start a complete overhaul. An audit is already underway." I gestured to the document in my hand. "It's all right here." I looked at my family for one last time. The picture of perfection they had all carefully curated was shattering before my eyes. All because I finally decided to show them the real estate contract, the one that proved I was never poor, just quiet. The quiet I had been seeking my entire life had finally arrived, but not in the way I had imagined. It wasn't the peace of my own home, but the deafening silence of 100 shocked people in a room that just minutes ago had been filled with forced cheer. The gasps and murmurs had died down. All that was left was a suffocating, unbearable stillness. My family, the Thorne family, stood before me, their carefully constructed world shattering into a million tiny pieces. Liam, the self-proclaimed golden boy, was the first to move. He lurched forward, his face contorted with rage, his hand outstretched toward the contract. "Give me that," he snarled. My father, quick as a flash, grabbed his arm, holding him back. "Liam, no," he hissed. "Calm down. Calm down. She's trying to ruin us." Liam thrashed against my father's grip. "Do you have any idea what this means? She's a liar. She's a fake." I held the document to my chest. "Am I?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft, because an audit is a lot harder to fake than a $5 million house bought with company money. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. The whispers started again, louder this time. The guests, who had been so eager to shake Liam's hand and compliment Madison's dress, were now backing away, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and outright horror. The perfect illusion of the Thorne family was gone. "Liam has been misappropriating funds for years," I stated, my voice carrying across the room. I wasn't speaking just to my family anymore. I was speaking to everyone. Every time he bought a new luxury car and told you it was a business write-off. Every time he used the company account to book a private jet for a weekend trip, it was money that should have gone back into the company. It was money that should have gone into the foundation my father built. My mother put a trembling hand on her chest. "How could you know all this?" "We would have known. Our accountants." "Your accountants are paid by Thorne and Company, Mom," I replied. "West Pine Capital's accountants are paid to uncover the truth. They're very, very good at what they do. We've been tracking these transactions for months." I turned my attention to Madison, who was now clutching her phone, her knuckles white. "And you, Madison? Do you remember that business trip to Paris you took last spring? You billed the company $35,000. My audit shows that $28,000 of that was for a shopping spree at the Champs-Élysées. The receipts for your designer bags and shoes were all carefully labeled as client gifts." Madison's mouth fell open, her face now a mask of pure terror. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a desperate plea. "Avery, please, this isn't fair." "Fair?" I laughed, a single sharp sound that was so out of place in the silent room. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you all laughed at me? Was it fair when you called me poor? Was it fair when you dismissed everything I worked for just because it wasn't flashy enough for you?" I gestured to the ballroom. Around us, to the sparkling crystal chandeliers, to the lavish decorations. "This isn't a family, it's a brand. And you were all so busy protecting the brand that you forgot about the people. You forgot about the integrity. You forgot about the values that my father was supposed to have built this on." My father stood there, a defeated man. He had always been so proud of his children, of their success, of their ability to take the family name to a new level. He was seeing now that their success was a lie, a house of cards built on a foundation of his own company's money. He finally let go of Liam's arm and just stood there, his shoulders slumped. "This is not a threat," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "It's a promise. A promise that Thorne and Company will be a different kind of company. One that values integrity over greed. I've already sent a copy of this to the company's lawyers. They're going to have a lot of questions for you." I gestured to Liam and Madison, whose faces had gone pale. I looked at my mother, whose eyes were filled with tears. She didn't have the strength to say another word. She just looked at me, a silent plea for mercy that I couldn't grant. Not yet. I had said everything I needed to say. I had done everything I needed to do. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had my contract, my purpose, and my company. And that was more than enough. I felt an inner strength that I had never known before. A decade of quiet work of biting my tongue and hiding my ambition had led to this one single moment of truth. And it was all worth it. My entire life, I had felt like a ghost haunting the Thorne family's perfect home. They looked at me, but they didn't see me. They heard me, but they didn't listen. And it had all been worth it, every quiet moment of frustration, every silent bite of my tongue, because it led to this one single moment of truth. And it was everything. The last thing I saw before I turned and walked away from that chaotic dinner party was the face of my father. Not the face of the proud, successful businessman I had grown up with, but the face of a man who looked suddenly very old, very tired, and very lost. A look I had seen only once before, a decade ago, on a cold winter day in Queens. I was 22, then a student at Columbia, still wide-eyed, and full of a naive kind of hope. My father, who was still my hero back then, was working on a big redevelopment project in a neighborhood that was full of old brick buildings. He had a big meeting with the tenants, and he had asked me to come along. He said it was important for me to see how business was done. We walked into the lobby, and my father stood on a little raised platform, his voice booming with confidence. He told the crowd of people gathered there, a mix of young families and elderly couples, that he was going to restore their buildings. He said he was going to make their homes beautiful with new windows and new doors and fresh paint. He talked about creating a real community. The people cheered, they clapped, they hugged my father, their faces full of gratitude and trust. One woman, an older lady who had a small grocery store on the corner, came up to him and held his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "My husband and I have lived here for 40 years. This is our home. We were so worried about being forced out. Thank you for saving us." My father just smiled and patted her hand. "Don't you worry, ma'am. We're a family company. We're here to help." I stood in the back of the room, my heart swelling with pride. This was my father. This was the man who had built an empire on a handshake and a promise. He was doing good. He was making a difference. But a few weeks later, everything changed. I was sitting in my dorm room when I saw a news report on my phone. The headline was something about a new luxury condo development, and the address was familiar. It was the address of the building in Queens. I clicked on the article and my blood ran cold. The article said that Thorne and Company had just received a permit to demolish the entire block. They weren't restoring the buildings. They were tearing them all down to build million-dollar condos. The community my father had promised was being bulldozed for a bigger profit margin. I drove out to the neighborhood the next day. The mood was completely different. The cheerful lobby was now full of people with grim faces clutching eviction notices. That same woman who had thanked my father was now crying on the phone, telling someone she had nowhere to go. Her husband, a quiet man with a kind face, just sat on a bench staring at his hands, defeated. I found my father's project manager, a cold-faced man named Peter, and I confronted him. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and confusion. "My father told me you were restoring this place." Peter just shrugged. "That was the plan, kid. But the numbers didn't make sense. The profit margin on a luxury building is 10 times higher. Your dad approved the change." I went to my father's office that night. He was sitting at his mahogany desk, a glass of scotch in his hand. I laid the newspaper article on his desk and pointed to the headline. "Why?" I asked him. "You promised them. You promised that woman. You looked her in the eye, and you told her you would save her home. My father looked at the paper, then at me. His expression was flat, impassive. Avery, you're being sentimental, he said, his voice quiet. This is business. You can't let emotions get in the way. It was a good business decision. A good business decision, I repeated, my voice rising. You broke a promise. You ruined a whole community for a few extra $1 million. He just sighed and ran a hand over his face. Avery, you don't understand. The real estate game is brutal. It's cutthroat. You do what you have to do to win. That was the night my father stopped being my hero. That was the night I realized the Thorne family's success wasn't built on integrity. It was built on the backs of people like that woman in Queens. It was built on lies and broken promises. And that night, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to play their game. I was going to build my own. One that was rooted in values, not vanity. And that was a promise I intended to keep. That promise, made in the silent conviction of a heartbroken 22-year-old, had been the foundation of everything. It had guided every business decision, every quiet investment, every small victory. I didn't want to build an empire of glass and steel like my family. I wanted to build one of brick and mortar, one that would shelter people instead of casting them out. And standing in that chaotic ballroom, the promise felt more real, more powerful than ever. I walked out of the main hall and into the quiet of the library, a room my father had always loved. The walls were lined with old books, the air smelled of leather and cigar smoke. I expected to find him there, and I was right. He was standing with his back to me, looking out the large window at the city lights. When he turned around, his face was a mix of bewilderment and profound sadness. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet defeat. Avery, he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. What did you do? Why did you do this? You're ruining us. I took a deep breath. This was the conversation I had been dreading and rehearsing for 10 years. I'm not ruining us, Dad. I'm saving you. I'm saving this family from what they were doing to it. He looked at me, a deep frown etched into his face. Saving us, by humiliating us in front of everyone, by trying to steal the family business. This isn't saving us. This is an act of war. Is it? I asked, walking closer to him. Is it an act of war when I expose the fact that your son was stealing millions from you? Is it an act of war when I hold your niece accountable for the fraud she was committing? I didn't do this to destroy you. I did this because I had to. He ran a tired hand over his face. They're my children, Avery. They're family. You don't just turn on your own. I didn't turn on them, Dad. They turned on you. They turned on the values you taught us. You built this company on a handshake and a promise. You built it on honesty and hard work. But Liam and Madison, they built their lives on lies and greed. They were bleeding this company dry. They were destroying your legacy right in front of your eyes. He just looked at me, a silent, painful sadness in his eyes. It was the face of a man who had worked his entire life to build something great, only to realize that the people he trusted to carry on his work were tearing it down. I could see the weight of that realization hitting him, a physical blow to his core. I tried to talk to you about it years ago, I said gently. Remember that project in Queens? I told you that what you were doing was wrong. But you told me I was being sentimental. You told me that was how business worked. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to block out the memory. I was a different man then, he said softly. I had to be. It was a dog-eat-dog world. You do what you have to do to survive. Maybe so, I conceded. But you taught me something else too. You taught me the value of a promise. You taught me the importance of integrity. And I never forgot those lessons. While you were teaching me to be tough, you were also teaching me to be good. I just chose to listen to that part of the lesson. He didn't say anything. He just looked out the window at the city lights, a man who was no longer in control of his own kingdom. What happens now? He finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. We clean house, I said. We go through every single transaction, every single one of them. We rebuild this company from the ground up on a foundation that won't crumble the moment someone offers a better deal. He turned to face me, a flicker of something new in his eyes. Not anger, not sadness. Something like a quiet respect. You could have ruined us, he said. You could have turned us into the authorities. You could have walked away and never looked back. But you didn't. Why, I smiled. I'm not trying to ruin you, Dad. I'm trying to save your legacy. I'm trying to show you that there's a better way to do business. A way that's not just about winning, but about doing the right thing. And that, I think, is a legacy that's worth fighting for. He just looked at me for a long moment, a new light in his eyes. A dawning realization that the daughter he had always considered a failure was the only one who had ever truly understood him. The polite chaos of the Christmas party had given way to the real chaos of my family's lives. The morning after was a quiet, cold one. The silence in my little Brooklyn apartment felt strange after the shouting, the pleading, the gasps of 100 people who had been witness to the Thorne family's undoing. I had woken up with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years, a quiet triumph that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with purpose. My phone rang at exactly 8 o'clock in the morning. It was Liam. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. The fourth time I answered. "Avery, what the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted, his voice hoarse with a mixture of rage and what sounded suspiciously like fear. "My lawyer called me this morning. He said he got a copy of the audit. What kind of sick game is this?" "It's not a game, Liam," I said, my voice as calm as a summer lake. "It's called accountability. You've been living a lie for a long time. Now you're going to have to face the consequences." "Consequences?" "My lawyer says you have proof. I took $2 million for that house in the Hamptons. He says you have receipts. What the hell is this? How did you even get that?" "I told you, Liam," I said. "I've been watching. And I've been documenting." He hung up on me without another word. A few minutes later, Madison called. She was crying, her voice high and frantic. "Avery, please, this is insane. My lawyer says you have proof of all my business trips. He says you have a list of all my receipts. He said it's not just a family thing, it's a federal thing. It is." I confirmed. "I don't think you can write off a designer handbag as a business expense, Madison, especially when the client you bought it for has a social security number that matches your own." The line went dead. I smiled. They were finally getting it. They had always treated the company like their personal piggy bank, a limitless source of funds for their extravagant lives. They were about to find out that the IRS had a very different definition of a business expense. A few minutes later, my own phone rang. It was Marcus, my business partner. He was a quiet, meticulous man with a brilliant mind for numbers and a quiet sense of humor. He had been my rock for the last 10 years, the only one who truly understood my mission. "I take it the dominoes are starting to fall," he said, his voice laced with amusement. "The dominoes have become a full-blown avalanche," I replied. "Liam and Madison are panicking. Their lawyers are calling." "Good," Marcus said. "I just wanted to let you know that our legal team has filed all the documents with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The papers are signed, sealed, and delivered. The audit is official. They can hire every high-priced lawyer in the city, but it won't matter. The truth is the truth." "So it's done," I said, a sense of finality settling over me. "It's done," he confirmed. "Now all we have to do is wait for the firestorm. And get to work." I spent the rest of the day in my office, a small, unassuming space in the financial district. It was a world away from the lavish penthouse of my parents. The walls were lined with whiteboards filled with flowcharts and business plans. The desks were covered in stacks of papers. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and every piece of it had been earned. Around noon, my father called. His voice was different now. Not angry, not defeated, just tired. "Avery," he said, "your brother and Madison are talking about lawyers. They say this is a legal matter. Is it?" "It is, Dad," I said gently. "It became a legal matter the moment they started stealing from the company. The moment they started putting their personal expenses on the corporate credit card. But their family, we can't do this." "They're the ones who did this, Dad," I said. "They're the ones who stole from you. From your company. From your legacy. I heard him sigh, a long, weary sound that broke my heart a little. He had spent his entire life building this company. He had done some questionable things, yes, but he had never been a thief. He had never been a fraud. He had always believed in the honor of the Thorn name, and now he was seeing that his children had dragged it through the mud. The next few weeks were a blur of phone calls and emails. The lawyers for Thorn and Company were scrambling, trying to get ahead of the story. Liam and Madison's lawyers were trying to negotiate a deal, but there was no deal to be made. I had all the evidence. Every single transaction, every single forged document, every single lie had been meticulously documented. They were in a cage and I had the key. I didn't enjoy it. There was no joy in watching them squirm. There was only a quiet sense of satisfaction, a feeling of a wrong finally being righted. They had spent their lives laughing at me, dismissing me, calling me poor. They had no idea that while they were busy playing games, I was building an army. An army of accountants, lawyers, and business professionals who believed in a different kind of success. A success that was built on hard work and integrity, not on lies and stolen money. They had always underestimated me, and now they were paying the price. It was strange to be a spectator in their downfall. For a decade, I had been the one on the outside looking in. Now they were on the outside looking up at me. My phone was still ringing with frantic calls from their lawyers and pleading messages from my mother. I ignored them all. My work was done. The dominoes had begun to fall, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop them. The first to feel the sting was Liam. His $5 million mansion in the Hamptons, the one he had so proudly bought with stolen company money, was put on the market. I saw it on the real estate websites, a perfectly crafted listing with glossy pictures of the pool, the sprawling lawns, and the marble floors. It was ironic. He had bought it to show off his success, but now it was a symbol of his failure. It was karma in action. A few days later, Liam called me, his voice no longer filled with rage, but with a tired kind of desperation. "Avery," he said, "you need to stop this. They're forcing me to sell the house." "I'm not forcing you to do anything, Liam," I said calmly. "The Securities and Exchange Commission Island, they're making you pay back the money you took. They're making you sell the house, the yacht, the fancy cars. You're going to have to pay for your mistakes." He was silent for a moment, and I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "But the house, it's my dream house. I can't just lose it." "You lost it a long time ago, Liam," I said. "You lost it the day you bought it with stolen money." He didn't have a comeback. He just hung up the phone. I didn't feel any satisfaction, just a quiet sense of finality. He had made his choices, and now he was living with the consequences. Madison's downfall was more public. Her entire life was built on social media, on the carefully curated illusion of perfection. That illusion was about to come crashing down. A few days after the news broke about the audit, I saw a post from one of her old sponsors. They had announced that they were cutting all ties with Madison Thorn, citing recent legal issues. Then another one followed, and another. Soon her entire feed was a sea of bad news. The comments were brutal. Her followers who had once adored her were now turning on her, calling her a fraud, a liar, a thief. The same people who had once hung on her every word were now gleefully celebrating her downfall. I saw a video of her crying, her face blotchy and tear-stained, as she tried to explain what had happened. She talked about a misunderstanding and family drama, but no one was buying it. Her followers had seen the articles. They had seen the truth. They had always loved the perfect version of Madison. Now they were seeing the real one, and they hated her for it. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place a week later. I received a phone call from Aunt Clara. She had a gentle, calm voice, so different from the rest of my family. "I'm calling to tell you I'm resigning from the Thorn and Company board," she said. I was a little taken aback. "Aunt Clara, you don't have to do that." "Yes, I do, Avery," she said. "I can't in good conscience continue to be associated with people who have so little integrity. You did the right thing. You exposed the lies. You stood up for what was right, and that's more than I can say for my brother's children." She paused for a moment, and I could hear a quiet sigh on the other end of the line. "Your father told me what happened," she continued. "He told me you could have ruined them. But you didn't. You gave them a chance to pay for their mistakes. You're a better person than I am, Avery. I'm not, I said. I'm just a person who made a promise to herself a long time ago. A promise to do things differently. She was silent for a long moment, and I could tell she was moved. Well, she said, I'm proud of you, Avery. I'm so proud. Her words hit me harder than any of the anger or the insults from my family. All my life I had longed for that kind of approval, that kind of validation. And now I had it. Not from my mother, not from my father, but from the one person who had always seen me for who I was, and it meant more to me than $1 billion. My revenge was complete. I had won. But standing there on the other side of the phone call, I didn't feel the triumph I had expected. I just felt tired. It was a hollow victory. I had taken down the enemy, but in the process, I had exposed the rotten core of my own family. And I was left with nothing but the quiet wreckage of what used to be my home. The quiet wreckage of my home wasn't a physical place. It was a feeling. A hollow ache that settled in my chest, a profound silence that followed the shouting and the anger. I had won the battle, but I felt no sense of triumph. I had exposed their lies, but in the process I had broken my family. I had spent so many years building something, and in one night I had taken it all away. I was left with a silence that was more unbearable than any insult they had ever thrown at me. 2 days later, my father called me. His voice was different, quiet and subdued. Avery, he said, can you meet me at the Thorne and Company building? Just you and me. I need to talk to you. The last time I had been in that building, it had been a fortress of arrogance, a symbol of everything I hated. Now, as I walked through the empty halls, it felt like a ghost town. The offices were quiet, the doors were locked, and the receptionist's desk was empty. My father was waiting for me in his office, sitting behind the large mahogany desk, a place where he had always looked so powerful, so in control. Now he just looked small. He gestured for me to sit down, and I took a seat in one of the leather chairs across from him. He didn't speak for a long time. He just looked at me, his eyes full of a mixture of anger, disappointment, and something I couldn't quite place. Your brother won't talk to me, he said finally, his voice raspy. Madison won't talk to me. They both blame me, and they both blame you. They say you've ruined their lives. I just looked at him. I wasn't going to defend myself. I wasn't going to make excuses. I had done what I had to do. Why, he asked, his voice rising a little. Why did you have to do it like this? You knew what was going on. You could have come to me. We could have handled this quietly as a family. Why did you have to tear us all apart? We couldn't have handled it quietly. Dad, I said, my voice gentle but firm. I tried. A decade ago, I tried. When I told you what you were doing to those families in Queens, you told me I was being sentimental. You told me that's how business worked. You told me to get tough. You told me to get with the program. He flinched. The memory of that conversation, the one that had broken my heart and changed my life, was a fresh wound for him now. I tried, I continued. But you didn't listen, and they didn't listen. They were so busy living a life of luxury and excess that they forgot about the family that built them. They forgot about the values you taught us. And they were about to take this entire company down with them. He looked at me, a flicker of something new in his eyes. A dawning realization. I didn't do this to destroy you, Dad, I said, my voice breaking a little. I did this to save you. I did this to save the company you built. The company you built on a handshake and a promise. The company that you built on integrity. He was silent for a long moment. A man who had worked his entire life to build something great, only to realize that the people he trusted to carry on his work were tearing it down. I could see the weight of that realization hitting him, a physical blow to his core. You could have just walked away, he said, his voice barely a whisper. You could have just left us to our own devices. But you didn't. Why, I smiled. I'm not trying to ruin you, Dad. I'm trying to show you that there's a better way to do business. A way that's not just about winning, but about doing the right thing. And that, I think, is a legacy that's worth fighting for. He just looked at me for a long moment, a new light in his eyes. It was a dawning realization that the daughter, he had always considered a failure, was the only one who had ever truly understood him. The only one who had ever truly understood his legacy, and the only one who had ever been willing to fight for it. That realization, the look of quiet understanding in my father's eyes, was a far more powerful victory than any legal document could ever be. He wasn't just seeing me, he was seeing the man he used to be the man he had wanted his children to become, the man he had forgotten how to be. The silence that followed was not one of defeat but of profound reflection. "I should have listened to you," he finally said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "A long time ago, when you were just a girl, I should have listened to you. I'm so sorry, Avery." His words hit me harder than any of the anger or the insults from my family. All my life, I had craved his approval, his validation, but I had never expected an apology. It was a raw, honest moment, a crack in the Thorne family facade that I had never seen before. It was a humbling moment for him, and a moment of closure for me. "I'm not doing this to hurt you, Dad," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm doing it to fix what's broken." He just nodded. He understood. He had always understood the value of a broken thing being mended, a damaged reputation being restored. He had just forgotten how to do it. A week later, I had a meeting with Liam and Madison. The meeting was at a neutral location, a small conference room in a building in downtown Manhattan. They walked in, their faces sullen and resentful. They looked like different people. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a sullen kind of resentment. "What do you want, Liam?" snapped, throwing his jacket on the back of his chair. "You've already taken everything. What else is there?" "I haven't taken everything, Liam," I said calmly. "I've just cleaned house." I looked at Madison. She was fidgeting with her phone, avoiding eye contact. "I've come to offer you a deal." They both looked at me, a flicker of hope in their eyes. A deal. A chance to go back to the way things were. They had no idea who they were dealing with. "I've decided not to press charges," I said, watching their expressions carefully. "The SEC and the IRS have enough information to put you both away for a long time. But I'm not going to give them that information. Not yet." They both looked at me, stunned. "Why?" Madison asked. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm not trying to destroy you," I said. "I'm trying to save you. And I'm going to give you a chance to learn a lesson you should have learned a long time ago. I'm going to give you a chance to learn how to do business with integrity." I opened a file and slid a stack of papers across the table. "I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for your time and your effort. I'm proposing that you both come to work for West Pine Capital, not in a corner office, not in a position of power. You'll both start from the bottom. From the ground up. You'll learn what it's like to build a company with your own hands, with your own sweat, and your own hard work. You'll learn what it's like to work for a company that values its employees, that values its community, and that values its reputation more than a quick profit." Liam laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "You want us to work for you? You're crazy. I'm a thorn. I don't work for anyone. You're not a thorn anymore." "Liam," I said, my voice firm, "the Thorne name means nothing now. You've ruined it, and until you learn how to fix it, you're not going to get it back." Madison looked at the papers, her face a mask of conflict. "And if we don't?" she asked. "If we say no, then I'll hand over the files to the SEC," I said. "And the next place you'll be working will be a federal penitentiary." They looked at each other, their faces filled with a mixture of rage, resentment, and a dawning understanding of their own powerlessness. They had lost everything: the money, the status, the respect. All of it was gone, and all they had left was a choice between prison and a chance at redemption. Liam stood up, his face red with fury. "You can't do this to us. Your family." "I'm your family, Liam," I said a little too calmly. "I'm the family that's trying to save you from yourselves, and I'm going to give you 1 week to decide. 1 week to decide if you want to rebuild your lives, or if you want to spend the rest of them in a prison cell." I stood up, walked out of the room, and left them alone with their decision. They had spent their lives playing a game they thought they could win. They had been living in a fake world of luxury and lies. Now they had a chance to get back to reality, And the question was, would they be brave enough to take it? The question I had left them with wasn't just a threat. It was an impossible choice, a choice between the life they knew and a future they couldn't even imagine. And for a full week I heard nothing. The silence was deafening, a constant reminder that my family was still out there, weighing their options, wrestling with their pride. I assumed they would choose prison. It would be easier in a way. They wouldn't have to face the humiliation of admitting they had been wrong. They wouldn't have to get their hands dirty. They wouldn't have to change. But on the 7th day, a terse email arrived in my inbox. The subject line was, "Your offer," and the body was a single line from Liam, "We accept." I felt a strange jolt of surprise. It wasn't triumph. It was more like the jolt you feel when you've prepared for a fight and the opponent suddenly puts down their fists. I called Marcus right away. "They took the deal," I said, my voice still laced with disbelief. "They had no choice, Avery," he said calmly. "Their lawyers told them what a long shot it would be to fight us. This was a deal with the devil and they knew it. But now the real work begins." "Are you ready?" I was ready. I had been ready for 10 years. The next day, Liam and Madison came to my office. They looked like they had been through a war. Their clothes were still expensive, but they wore them with a kind of resignation. The sparkle in their eyes was gone, replaced by a sullen emptiness. They sat across from me, their bodies rigid, their faces carefully blank. "What's the first step?" Madison asked, her voice flat. "The first step is that you both get to work," I said. "Liam, you'll be working on our new affordable housing project in Queens, the old buildings that are being renovated, not the luxury condos. You'll be working on site with the construction crew. You'll be doing manual labor. You'll be learning what it's like to build something from the ground up with your own 2 hands. His face paled. "Manual labor? I have an MBA from Yale." "You can't be serious." "I'm dead serious, Liam," I said. "You're not working for me. You're working for the people who need a place to live. And you're going to learn what it's like to build something that actually helps people." I turned to Madison. "Madison, you'll be working with me on our community outreach program. We're partnering with a local nonprofit that helps people in transitional housing. You'll be helping them get back on their feet. You'll be learning what it's like to help people who don't have $1 million and a social media following. You'll be learning what it's like to be a human being, not just a brand." Madison looked at me, a flicker of outrage in her eyes. "You want me to volunteer? I have 100 million followers." "You had 100 million followers, Madison," I said quietly. "Now you have nothing. And you have a choice. You can either rebuild your life or you can spend it in a prison cell. It's your choice." They left my office in silence. They didn't shake my hand. They didn't say goodbye. They just walked out, 2 people who had lost everything. The next few months were a blur of phone calls and emails. I would get calls from Liam, his voice filled with frustration and resentment. He complained about the heat, the dust, the long hours. He complained about the people he was working with, the hard-working men and women who were building a better life for themselves and their families. He was a fish out of water, a prince who had been forced to live like a pauper. And Madison, her posts on Instagram became a strange, quiet kind of diary. She would post pictures of the people she was working with, their faces blurred, their stories told in a few short words. She wrote about what it was like to listen to people who had lost everything. She wrote about what it was like to help a single mother find a job. Her posts were no longer about her perfect life. They were about the imperfect lives of others. One day, I got a call from Liam. His voice was different now. Not angry, not resentful, just tired. "Avery," he said, "I found a problem with the foundation. It's not stable. We're going to have to tear down the whole thing and rebuild it." I felt a jolt of surprise. It was the first time he had called me to talk about the work. He was no longer complaining. He was just a person doing his job. I realized then that my plan might actually be working. My family might actually be learning what it was like to build something from the ground up with integrity and with purpose. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt a flicker of hope. That flicker of hope was like a single match struck in a dark room. It was small, fragile, but it was there. It wasn't about what I had taken from them, but what I had given them a chance to rebuild. A decade of anger and resentment began to dissolve, replaced by a cautious optimism. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally learning. The next year was a long and difficult journey for all of us. I rarely saw Liam and Madison. We were all working in different parts of the city in different worlds. I was buried in the day-to-day work of Westbine Capital, overseeing the meticulous rebuilding of Thorne and Company. We were tearing down the rotten foundation and building something new, something that would last. I would get the occasional phone call from Liam, his voice now filled with a strange kind of humility. He had stopped complaining about the dust and the long hours. He would call to ask me questions about building codes, or to tell me about a problem he had solved on the site. He was learning. He was becoming a builder, not just a brand. And Madison's Instagram feed, once a testament to her vanity, had become something else entirely. She had started a blog, and she wrote about the people she met in the transitional housing program. She wrote about the dignity of hard work, the resilience of the human spirit. She still had her moments of old Madison, but they were fewer and farther between. She was no longer a person who just took. She was learning what it was like to give. 1 year after that dreadful Christmas party, my father called me. His voice was different now. Not tired, not defeated, but filled with a quiet pride. "Avery," he said, "can you meet me for dinner? Just you and me? I have something I want to show you." We met at a small, unassuming Italian restaurant in the city. It was the first time we had been together, just the two of us, since the night. Everything fell apart. He looked healthier now, happier. The weight of his children's lives had been lifted from his shoulders. After we ate, he pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. "Do you remember this, Avery?" he asked. This was the first business plan I ever wrote. This was my dream, to build a company that was based on integrity, that was based on hard work, a company that would build up communities, not tear them down. He handed me the book, and I flipped through the pages. It was full of his handwriting, his hopes, his dreams. And in that moment, I saw the man he had been, the man he had wanted to be. "I got lost along the way," he said, his voice quiet. "I got so focused on the money, on the status, on the success, that I forgot why I had started in the first place. I gave Liam and Madison everything, and I let them forget what was important. I failed them, Avery. I failed all of us." "You didn't fail me, Dad," I said. "You gave me the most important lesson of my life. You taught me what happens when you build on a weak foundation. You taught me the value of a promise." He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "And you, my daughter, you taught me what it's like to build it all back up again." He stood up and walked to a small table in the corner of the restaurant. On the table was a model of a building. It was a beautiful modern design, sleek and elegant, and it was a model of the new Thorne and Company headquarters. But it was also something more. It was a model of a new building in Queens, a building with new apartments, a community garden, and a small library. It was a building that would be a home for 100 families. It was the same building that he had promised to build all those years ago. "The building in Queens is finished," he said, his voice filled with pride. Liam and Madison worked on it. They saw it through from beginning to end. And they learned. They learned that the greatest success isn't in what you own, it's in what you create, it's in the lives you touch. He turned to me, his eyes full of a quiet understanding. "You didn't ruin us, Avery. You saved us. You tore us down so we could rebuild. And now we're stronger than we've ever been." My revenge was complete. But it wasn't what I had expected. It wasn't a triumph. It was a quiet, profound sense of peace. I had spent a decade fighting my family, but in the end I had saved them. I had saved my father's legacy, and in the process I had found my own. And I realized then that the greatest revenge isn't in proving them wrong, it's in becoming exactly who they said you couldn't be. If my story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my shoes? What have you built in silence while others doubted you? Let's talk about it. Let's give each other credit for the quiet work, the long nights, the tough choices. And if you're facing a moment like I once did when the world expects nothing from you, don't shout louder, just build stronger. You don't need approval to begin. You need purpose and consistency. The rest will come. Support this journey by subscribing to the channel. There are more stories ahead about resilience, redemption, and redefining success on your own terms. Because legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you create. And sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It's becoming exactly who they said you couldn't be. So subscribe, stay with me, and let's build something that lasts.